Hey, welcome back to another video. I'm Ivan Calderon, and today we're doing a beat breakdown. Welcome back to another video. Hopefully you're doing well. Hopefully you're staying safe. Now, if you're unaware, for the entire month of April, I've set a challenge for myself to make and upload one beat a day to my Instagram. Now, aside from the regular content that I upload every Thursday to the channel, I also want to upload a beat breakdown video every Tuesday, at least for the month of April, breaking down one of the beats that I made the week before. Now, of course, this gets voted on my Instagram, so if you want to see what I'm cooking up and if you want to vote on what beat gets broken down here on Tuesdays, then make sure to follow me there. But okay, for this week, the most voted beat was the one with the Victoria Monét Acapella.
Been watching TV, hair smell like tea tree, trying to take it easy, but shit ain't easy.
Now, the way this even came about was that on Friday, Victoria Monét, which you might know her for co-songwriting 7 Rings for Ariana Grande, decided to upload an acapella and then challenge producers to do their thing. I, of course, could not resist, so without further ado, let me show you how I made that beat. Okay, so let's get into it. Now, step number 1 was to find the key and the BPM of this vocal. Now, finding the key was super simple. All you gotta do is use something like Auto Key, which I've done a review on, so I'm gonna link it up top here, or something like Serato Sample. If you're a little bit more savvy with theory, then you could, find the root note on a piano or piano roll, and then kind of go from there. I just used Auto Key, and that gave me F major. Now, finding the BPM was a little bit more difficult because unfortunately for us, she was not really on time. Now, regardless of that, I wanted to slow down that vocal anyway, so I just decided to pick a BPM that was a lot slower. In this case, it was 52, and then I literally sliced her vocals at the transients where it made sense and then time stretched everything to make sure it fit on the BPM. From there, I added some crossfades and then rebounced the whole thing to make sure it was one single file once again. Once I did all of that, then again, you get the vocal that I just played you.
Been watching TV, hair smell like tea tree, trying to take it easy, but shit ain't easy.
Another thing to point out is that I am in regular time or standard time. I'm not quite sure what the terminology is here, but I could have also done this in double time. So instead of 52 BPM, I could have had this at 104. Now, the way to know if you're in double or regular is if your snare hits on the 2 and the 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4, you're in regular time. If it hits on the 3, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, you're in double time. Now, this becomes a point of preference, but I stuck with regular time for this one. Now, the next step was to figure out what chords to lay under her vocals, and relatively speaking, compared to everything else in the beat, this is probably the one that took the most time. Now, there's a bunch of ways to do this, and obviously, if you know theory, this goes by a lot quicker, but if you don't, then you could use something like Scalar, which is exactly what I did. Now, I've done a review on Scalar, and I'm not gonna talk too much about it here, but this is my #1 recommend to every producer out there. I've done a full review, and I'm gonna link it up top here, but I'll also be linking this plugin down below in case you want to pick it up. But with Scalar, what I did was I first selected the key that I wanted to play under, so F and then major, and then what it does is it shows you the chords for that key. From there, it was just a matter of experimenting and seeing what chords fit with whatever she was singing. Now, the way that I like to use this is I bring these chords down to the bottom. This is kind of like a little sequencer in the order that I think they fit, and then once they're down here, you could also mess around with the octaves, with the inversions, and I played around with that until something sounded good. Now, in the end, I ended up playing these chords here. And of course, we have a Rhodes for the instrument. And it just repeats again. We have some inversions going on. And then it switches up here. We're much, much higher. And a lot more spread out. And then for that breakdown piece at the end, we went back to what we had before. Now, a cool little trick you can do here to differentiate the choruses from everything else in the song without having to change an instrument is simply to mess around with the velocity. So if you take a look for the Rhodes, in the beginning for that intro section, I had the notes at 50% velocity. However, whenever we got to the chorus, I had them set to 75, and that gives you a brighter feeling using that same instrument that ultimately lets you know you're in a different part of the song. Now, moving on, the next thing that I added was a snap just to kind of keep myself on time. Now, when it comes to stuff like this, you have to be aware of what genre you're producing, and this is where sound selection comes into play. Now, I could have gone with a snare, I could have gone with a clap, but I wanted to make this very intimate feeling, slower R&B type of beat, so I knew that a snap would be perfect. Now, from there we moved on to a hi-hat, and for this I had two. Now, the first hat that I had was playing quarter notes, and that sounds like this. The second hi-hat was double that, and it was playing eighth notes, and that sounds like this. Now, often in my beats, especially for something like this, I tend to add those like chug motion hats, and I've shown you guys how to do that by lowering the velocity of every other hat by 50%, but you can also get creative and have two hats, one playing at a certain value and then the other one double that. So for this case, for me, I had my first hat playing at quarter notes and then the second hat playing at eighth notes, and we get this here. Now, the next step was to add some sort of supporting instrument to kind of fill things in, and for me, that's usually a pad. Now, this was really easy. All I did was I selected the instrument that I wanted, and then I copied the chords from the Rhodes and brought them down, so that pad sounds like this. Very like grandiose and very churchy. So once we layer that up with the Rhodes, we get this. Add in that snap and two hats. The last element that I added to this beginning section was a kind of a plucky synth bass, and that by itself sounds like this. Now, this was just again done to kind of provide more movement, but if we play everything in the beginning, minus the vocal, we get this. Okay, so moving on to the chorus of this beat, the first thing that I did was I had to figure out what chords to play now because she kind of switched it up a little bit. And I played them a little bit more spread apart because I knew that I wanted to add more instruments. Now those chords sound like this. And then we have a lower chord. And it just repeats. Now the pad is playing the exact same thing. I just copied that and now we get this. That plucky bass also changed because the chords change, and together that sounds like this. Super spread apart. Now, as far as the drums go, we still had that snap and we still have the first two close hats. However, for the first hat that was playing quarter notes before, now it's playing eighth notes. On top of that, I also brought in a third hat, and this one's playing 16th notes. Now that third hat sounds like this. And once we add in the other two, we get this here. I also added an open hat, and that is playing very sparingly, but that sounds like this. And then a crash in the beginning to introduce the whole section. Finally, a kick to bring this all in together. Now, two things that I want you to notice here. Number one is that the kick is not overwhelming. This, again, I wanted to be more of an intimate feel, a slower R&B type of vibe. So I played my drums, or at least I programmed them out sparingly and spread apart, so it kind of gave that feeling of openness. The second thing is that on my close hat, the third one with the 16th notes, I decided to add a roll and right before some of the snaps. So if I bring the snaps in, you'll see it here. And this is what that sounds like. Now, this is a very popular technique because it provides a dynamic rise with a nice resolution once that snap hits. Now, the last two instruments that I added to this section was another bass, and this one was more of like an underwater bass, and that sounds like this. Now, all I did for this was I copied the pattern from the first bass down to the bottom and then extended that note till the beginning of the next note. Now, the last thing that I added here were some mallets, and again, for this, I just copied the notes from the Rhodes, and then I staggered the notes a little bit to kind of create this vibe here. Chord repeats, and then it switches up to the second one. So in its entirety, this section sounds like this. Now for this last breakdown section, it's literally almost a replica of the first half, with the exception that I swapped out that synthy pluck bass with the underwater bass, and we get this. And once again, the whole beat with the vocal sounds like this.
Been watching TV, hair smell like tea tree, trying to take it easy, but shit ain't easy when you can't come and see me. You FaceTime when you need me. Quarantine got me thinking that it ain't enough. Hitting your phone when all day and night I've been alone. And if we're in the middle of an apocalypse, you would be the last one that I really wanna kiss, but I'm sitting at home.
But that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you're not already. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram, but I will see you on the next one.